I ended up embracing New Thought spirituality. It began as a child with questioning of old thought. I was raised in the Nautical Church, and my mom, shared mom, loved my experience growing up as an Episcopalian. And I was not, some people talk about their religious upbringing as something they endured and survived, but were horribly or mildly scarred by, and that's not my situation at all. But at a young age, at least by the age of 12, and maybe even younger than that, I was questioning and not getting answers that made any sense to me, even as a little kid. And there, in the Episcopal service, there is something called the Nicene Creed. And I don't know if it's common to other Protestant denominations or Catholics or not, but at one part of the Nicene Creed, we affirm, as good Episcopalians, week after week, that we are not worthy so much as to gather up the crumbs under thy table. And I was like, that just stuck in my throat. Like, why? Why aren't we worthy to gather crumbs? Like, they're under the table. I got to be worthy for at least that. And it just didn't resonate with me. It didn't. And I remember asking that question and other similar questions to my Sunday school teacher, who, God bless her, was just a lady trying to do good work in the world, and she didn't have all the answers. And she said, well, I'll talk to Father Joe, and that's a good question. I'll answer. And she came back and with an explanation about, well, God gave us the Word, and it's the Bible, and that's what it says. And I'm like, yeah, but what if the Bible's wrong? And what about people that never even heard of the Bible? What if people have heard of the Bible, but they're raised in some other tradition, and it just makes no sense to me that this is the only one right way, and everybody else is sinners, and if we don't accept Jesus Christ as our Savior, we're damned to hell for all eternity. That just is bizarre to me. But I want to be clear. One previous time I spoke here, I may have misrepresented my position, and in doing so maybe offended people. For some people, the Nicene Creed is perfect. It speaks to them. It gives them what they need, and it speaks of mistakes, being off target, asking for forgiveness, which I am all about. And thank the Lord, because I am full of mistakes every day. And I think it's a really valuable ability to admit when you've been off course, and to ask forgiveness, and to take stock of yourself on an ongoing basis, and where you've been wrong, admit it and move on. For me, having that define me as a human and my worthiness, that went too far. It did not work for me. But I don't mean now or ever to disparage anyone's beliefs. We do say that there are many paths to the mountaintop, and I firmly believe that. So I'm not belittling the Episcopal Church or Christianity or any other organized religion. But this was my experience, and I felt like this doesn't really speak to me. And so there's that. And then I had this weird little detour when I was, I think, 15. I had been going camping with a group of Lutherans for the previous 3 or 4 summers. And I loved it. We went up in the boundary waters in northern Minnesota, and it was just beautiful and out there in nature, and we drank right out of the lake, and we carried everything with us and we were out for 10 days and didn't see a motorized anything, or some days any other humans at all. And it was just absolutely stunning and spectacular, and I haven't been back in whatever it is now, 35 years, and I hope to. Wow, that's exciting. That's the Lord telling me that I've gone over time. So thank you very much. I made it all the way to 15. But I went camping with this church group, and one year I had a very committed camp counselor. She was a sophomore, junior in college, so a girl by my standards now. But she was all about the spirituality. She said, make no mistake, this is great up here, but God's not in the water, God's not in the trees, God's not in the sky, God's in the Bible. God has given us His Word. And if you really want to get right with the Lord, you read the Bible. And I really thought she was super cool. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to give that a shot. Because 15, I've never read the Bible. And so I started. And then, this is weird, but I went to boarding school. And so actually maybe I was 16 and not 15. But I went back, it was my senior year of high school. I was in boarding school in New England, so I was far from home. And so I didn't have the direct influence of my parents on a day-to-day basis. But I had a dorm head who, as it turns out, was devout something. He was pretty fundamentalist as well. And I don't know how it came up, but I talked about, like, yeah, I've been getting into my faith and I've been reading the Bible. And he said, well, if you ever would like to, you can join me in church. We had a chapel on campus, but it was kind of non-denominational. And he said, I don't think they do a good job of preaching scripture. And I think that's, so I got a church that I go to. And if you're like, come, you can come with us. And so I was all about it. I jumped on that. And for something like 3 months, and this was weird, at least in 1980, whatever, 5, to get myself out of bed at some ungodly hour, like 8:30 in the morning, and go with my dorm head to church in the village. But I was, it was just like, if I'm going to be a Christian, I should know what it is. And if I'm going to give this a shot, if I'm going to live my faith, I should know what my faith is, and I should give it a real shot. And so I did, and I didn't really dig the church that much, but how can you tell? If you really got to, it's like dieting for 10 minutes. So it didn't work. So I did this for a while, but ironically, I was taking a class that was required at my school in the religious studies department. It was, I can't remember the title, but it was something about the history of religion. And we started looking at religions, starting with, whatever, the first ideas of spirituality in early developing humans, and the idea that there are spirits in the forest, and, if you go down by the swamps, they'll get you. And then the evolution of, like, benevolent and evil spirits into the idea of there being gods, and gods of the harvest, and gods of the weather, and gods of the rain, and gods of the whatever, and, the evolution to a monotheistic theology that happened sort of concurrently around the planet. So this was really interesting to me. This can't be coincidence that we all kind of started with our little tribal beliefs, and we, separately but in parallel journeys, journey to this idea of a one supreme God, and only God that rules over all things and everyone. And long story short, what I came up with was, as an answer was that spirituality was all garbage. It was just an answer to questions that science couldn't answer. And as science got better and better at answering the mysteries of the universe, the idea that Apollo hauls the sun across the sky gave way to, no. We're in the solar system, and we travel around the sun, and we rotate on our axis and like that. And we don't get disease from the evil spirits. We get disease from walking down there on our bare feet, and parasites get in through the soles of our feet, and we get sick, and we go away, and it doesn't matter if we burn sage or not, we just get better, or whatever. And so that's what my 16-year-old brain came up with. There is no God. It's all wrong and misguided, and that's what I came up with. And so I U-turned on the spot. Stopped going to church, and poor Mr. Dowdy, he was a really good guy. And for months afterwards, on Saturday, he would look for a cool, casual way to say, hey, buddy. He was not cool or casual at all. He was like, so you up for church in the morning? Or, and I was like, no, I don't think so. I've got, work, whatever I said, But, so I broke up with him. I was sad. But, that's where I went. And I considered myself an atheist or agnostic or something. I think agnostic is what I would have landed on, because how can one be certain? But that was kind of my answer. Like, religion, spirituality in general, is there to answer the unanswerable, and we're answering more all the time. And it just makes us feel better, and it's a nice feeling, there's some guy in the clouds looking down and, protecting us or whatever, and we're going to live, in perfect harmony forever and ever after we die. So that's a good feeling, but I just thought it was wrong. So that's where I was for a good decade or so. And not to get into it too much, but when I was 25, I was diagnosed with cancer. And kind of scary, and not what you want to go through at any age, but including 25. And it was advanced enough that I had to go through chemotherapy and all that. And it was a dark, challenging time for me. And I felt terrible. I felt terrible all of the time, but sometimes I felt really, really terrible, and sometimes I felt better, but still terrible. And then I'd start my next cycle, and I'd feel even worse again. And what was, I think, harder for me than that was the feeling that I made everyone around me miserable. And the more someone loved me, the more misery I brought into their lives. And it's not as though I ever thought, oh, this is it. The prognosis was never terrible, but it wasn't great, and not surviving was a definite possibility. And I felt bad. I just felt bad. And I felt ashamed. And so that's where I was. When a friend, who I'd been friends with, a guy, so I was 25, he was 27 or something, and we were together during this time, and he said, I don't know where it came from, but he ended up posing me the question, do you consider yourself a spiritual person? I thought about it and said, no, I don't think so. So even going through that, and, because truly, when you're 25, you haven't thought about, I might die, ever. I hadn't, and so it was a shock to my system. And so I was definitely aware of my own mortality. But even in that, I was no, I don't consider myself a spiritual person. He said, that's really weird, because I think you're the most spiritual person I know. And obviously I've never forgotten that, but I was like, it struck me, I was like, how weird, And in that conversation somewhere, he said, there's this thing I've discovered, this place I go, I feel like you would dig it. And he was really careful not to call it church. But he finally got around to it. It's like, okay, I don't want to call it church. Because for me, church brings up all kinds of feelings of guilt and, going out of duty and responsibility and everything like that. But for those of you aware, he was talking about Agape. Agape International Spiritual Center, I think is their full title. And it's like, it's this, somebody turned me on to it, and it's really cool, and they have a cool message and great music, and I feel like you would like it. And I was like, okay. Given maybe my vulnerable state, I was maybe more open. And so we went. I remember the first time I ever went was a Wednesday night, which is maybe good, because it was a room way bigger than this, and just a circle of chairs, but maybe 50 or 80 chairs around. But a far more intimate gathering than their Sunday service. Even then, this was 1994, but even then they were big, and now they're huge. Reverend Michael Beckwith, I think maybe the big shift came when The Secret came out, if you're familiar with that. He was one of the central people being interviewed in that film, and they went from big to very, very big. But so this was a Sunday night, and Wednesday night, and I walked in this room. We sat in a circle, and I didn't know what to expect at all. But he started speaking a message of love. At its core, just a message of love, and this idea that God is all there is. God is everything. There is nothing that exists that is not God. And so, by definition, you are God. Not figuratively, literally. You are the stuff of God. And I'm not a quantum physicist at all, but if you want to, you can kind of drill down into the fact that matter, at the very most elemental levels that we understand, is energy. And that we are, so it's not a figurative statement. It's like we are literally one with God. And you are a perfect embodiment of this divine perfection. And here I was in this body pumping toxic blood, and it was overwhelming to me. And it was nothing about not being worthy and nothing about sin. It was about you have divine, at the very least the way I understood it, you have divine potential. You can be that perfect embodiment of God. Jesus walked the planet, God everywhere. Whatever your Messiah is, you have that same potential. You have that same God presence. You have that same perfection within you. And that absolutely rattled me and excited me, and it opened up the floodgates for weeks and weeks and weeks. At Agape, they have a tissue ministry. And there's, I bet, several dozen people the whole time, walking around, handing out tissues. Because there are lots and lots of people on the planet who spent the whole time feeling bad, feeling wrong, feeling sinful, feeling ashamed, feeling like they can't apologize enough for simply existing or whatever. And you walk in a room and have someone who's charismatic and dynamic and beautiful and articulate and telling you, you are the perfection of God and God loves you and that's all there is really to know. It's a powerful feeling that I thought I'd forgotten until I tried to share with you here. So that was agape, and that was the beginning of my journey, and it was really truly just the beginning. I went for a long time, years. I went on Sundays, felt great music. Left. Would go back on Sunday. Wow, it sounds good. Brunch, and I had my 45-minute recharge every Sunday, and that's as far as it went for me for a while. I didn't connect the dots. I didn't really embody or really spend too much time thinking about that message in the rest of my week. I didn't have daily spiritual practice. I didn't take any classes. I wasn't meditating. I didn't pray per se. I hadn't learned five-step prayer. I was just kind of an opportunistic feeder, but it was a good place to be every Sunday, and it did me good, and it really fed me spiritually, and with the cancer thing, I got better. Got through it all, and put that behind me, but I stayed at the church. It wasn't just a temporary thing. It's like I really, like my friend had told me, I wanted to go. And for a 25-year-old kid to want to pry himself out of bed every Sunday morning and go to church, it says something. It was purely attraction. There's no sense of responsibility or guilt. Truly, even then, it was big enough. Nobody knew if I was there or not. It just felt like a chance to feel good. And so that's what kept me coming back. And even though it took me years to really invest in my spirituality and bring it into my daily life, I eventually got there. And probably because of Maureen. When I started dating Maureen, she was still trying to be a Catholic, but she'd been divorced, and we went to one Catholic service together with my son, and we happened to land there. Maureen may have told the story, but we landed there on the International Marriage Day. At least in the Catholic Church. I've never heard of it. But there we are. And so it's a love. St. Monica's is a beautiful church, and it's light and bright, and there's, Arnold Schwarzenegger's there, and all kinds of fancy people, and people tell me how beautiful my son was, and he looks just like me, and like, okay. Go down that path. But on International Marriage Day, the priest asks everybody that's united in this sacrament of marriage, rise and be recognized. And we sat and no? Oh. Okay. And then I think the drill was, if you've been married more than 10 years, remain standing. And a lot, people sat down. If you've been married more than 20 years, sit down. And long story short, the couple that had been married the longest was sitting in the pew right immediately in front of them. So the whole congregation is turned and looking at them, and we're like behind them. And Owen's 4 at this point and playing with Hot Wheels or whatever he's doing. But I look over at Maureen and she's this is so uplifting. But hey, I was in love. I'll be Catholic, I'll do whatever, And the sermon, then it was bad. It made her feel terrible. Long story short, it just made her feel terrible. It was about, she's a harlot now, and she's going to heaven. And so that's a bummer. And that was actually the last time we ever went to the church. And I said, there's a place I go that, I don't know, you might like. And that was the beginning of her journey. And she leapfrogged past me decades ago. But we went to Agape for a long time, and then really just because of logistics, we moved to the North Hollywood Church of Religious Science, and now the North Hollywood Center for Spiritual Living. And it was smaller, still big, but smaller, and we became kind of really invested, we became very invested. A thing that happened actually right after Maureen discovered the church is 9/11. And so that was another time of vulnerability for all of us. And so we, and that might have really been it. Maureen started taking classes and talking all about it, and becoming a spiritual practitioner and all of that. And so that's probably, like, almost anything I've accomplished in my life is directly attributable to Maureen. And it was okay, I begrudgingly was dragged in her direction and started getting real about my spirituality. And that's when my life changed. It became a part of my daily spiritual practice. I began reading some of the spiritual texts there. I began meditating every day. And I've fallen off that wagon a long time ago. I haven't meditated regularly in many years now. But there was a stretch of, I would say, a decade where I didn't go a day without starting my day with meditation. 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Changed my life. And here's some things that I learned that continue to blow my mind on an ongoing basis. The first is that fundamental statement that there's no distance between me and God. There's no distance between anyone and God. God is in all things and everyone, and I say that a lot, but I mean it literally. God is there. You don't have to turn anywhere except maybe within. That helps you quiet your mind and hear the message that is available to you at any given time. For me, and I bet I get some support here from somebody, the distinction between meditation and praying is I would describe praying as talking to God and meditation as listening. And for me, it's an analogy that works because, you know, I'm like anybody, and probably more so than most of you, but I've got dialogues running in my head, and I've got things, and I'm planning about what I got to do, and, you know, resentments and self-doubt about things that have already happened, and I'm very often not present in the moment. And even when I am, I've got that monkey mind chatter just running a mile a minute. And, you know, I'm a school teacher. I hear from my students often enough, well, you never told us. And I'm like, I know for a fact that I did. I know for a fact I told you 17 times. I know it's everywhere. I can prove it. But here's the thing. If you're talking, if you're spacing out, if you're doing something else, you're not listening to what I'm saying. And, you know, I remember being a teenager in school, and so I get it. I don't take it personally, but to me, it's a similar thing. God is there sending me very clear information all the time. And so for me, that's what that, even if it's only 5 minutes a day, that's what that is stilling the mind and just receiving. And it's remarkable what can happen and how a life can transform. So the fundamental idea that God is everything, and that makes all of us the same being, the same essence. We are not separate. There's not me and you. I'm not in competition with you, which competition drove everything I did from the age of 0 to at least 25 when I had cancer. I had to prove that I was better than everyone else. I don't know why. It was not from my parents. At a very young age, they started, I was like, Will, it's okay. A B is fine. But it wasn't for me. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't just about being good. I had to be better than everyone else, which is impossible. So I had to try harder and harder and harder. And I think that's how you end up with cancer at 25. So this idea that everyone was on my team. I'm God. God's on my side. I'm not sinful. It was transformational. And so whatever your metaphor is, we're drops of water in that same river that flows through all things, or we are all little waves on the same ocean, whatever. But that spoke to me, and that was a radical new idea. And it's still really lovely for me. It's still really lovely. Because I'm still a human, and I still get cut off in traffic or whatever, and that jerk, and not always at all, but sometimes I can remember this. And I'm like, that guy's doing his or her best right now, and that's all I know. And Lord knows that my best at sometimes is incredibly shitty. And sometimes my best is beautiful. And the rest of the time, it's somewhere in between. But it's helpful. That brings me peace of mind. Those moments, those little moments when I don't make someone else the enemy, when I don't put someone else outside of me, when I don't think that God screwed me over because of X, Y, or Z, because there's no distance. And all of these expressions that I've heard now for decades, they help me. God is as close as my breath. Wow. Wow. And it's been a beautiful thing. The idea that I'm not sinful was transformational. Again, I don't know where it came from, but I lived with just a pervading sense of guilt. Anytime I fell short of perfection. We have the Ten Commandments, which I think are basically good rules. I would phrase them probably differently. I could turn them from thou shalt not into thou shalt pretty easily. And there are a lot of good lessons there. So I have no problem with any of that. But let's face it, we miss the mark all the time. We come up short all the time. We do our best and fail all the time. But it doesn't have to define who I am. And it doesn't mean I'm a bad person. And even if I did a bad thing, even if I did it on purpose in that moment, it's because I messed up. And I started to think of myself as like a puppy. And God must feel about me like I'm a puppy. Puppies do horrible things. They chew up your stuff. And it sucks. And they poop where they shouldn't poop. And it's a hassle taking care of puppies. But it's a puppy. It's doing its best. And you don't hate the puppy for chewing up the couch or eating your sunglasses or pooping or peeing or any of that stuff. You love the puppy. You want to steer it in the right direction. Say, we poop outside and don't chew the couch anymore. But you don't hate the puppy. You don't kick it. You don't say, you're a horrible puppy. At least I don't. And no loving God that created me in their image would treat me that way. So the idea of being sinless and the idea that there really is no sin was liberating and transformational to me. And that there's no one judging me. And that all it means when I fall short is it's a chance to learn and choose again. That's all it is. And so the good news is I get learning opportunities every day, over and over and over again. But that's it. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. And that's helpful to me. There's an expression. Oh, that's too far ahead. But all these things, I'll just list them, what I wrote them. These are expressions you've probably heard. But I know that when I first heard them, it was transformational and helpful for me. God doesn't have to forgive you. God is rooting for you. The idea that God is on my side, the idea that God goes before me, smoothing my path and making ready my way. It's like, oh my God, if God's on my side, I'm in good shape. And all that heavy lifting, all that competition, all that effort on my part, all that trying harder to prove that I'm good enough, I don't have to do that. I can hand that over to God. And I felt like I could just breathe again. And it's a beautiful thing. And I learned to let God, at least sometimes. I come home and I'm tired and I'm grouchy and I'm complaining about I literally right now have 128 essays to grade before tomorrow. It will not happen, of course. And that's just a thing, but I'm like, okay, God, you're up. So I get uptight in the morning. Will gently or not so gently point that out to me. And so I'm a work in progress, as probably we all are. But today's lesson, for those of us doing Miracles Live 365, so today's lesson in A Course in Miracles, it says, let me recognize that my problems have been solved. And for me, that's just like God is my solution. Whatever my problems are, they've been solved. And I can get busy telling God how big my problems are, or I can get busy telling my problem how big my God is. And that's a very different feeling for me. And somehow or other, I'm here now. Whatever struggles I've been through, I'm still here. So how bad can it really be? And if God's on my side, what can oppose me? And here's the expression that I think was the biggest for me. And I've heard many, many times since. But the first time I heard someone explain to me that God is for you and nothing is against you. It's like, really? Really? God's for me? And everybody is cheering for me? And that's a different feeling. That's a very different feeling. I was in Hollywood for 20 years trying to be an actor, and only one actor gets any job. And it's really easy to get caught up in the competition. And God, he got it again. And it's, at one point in my career, I was doing well, and it wasn't uncommon to get down to, like, my agent was like, well, they're deciding between you and one other guy. And, it seemed like 98% of the time it's the other guy. But there is enough God for everybody. I started to think of God as sunshine. And you can sit out in the sun and put out your solar panels and do whatever you want. And it's not taking away my good. There's plenty for me. You do whatever you want. You're not taking my sun, and you can't take my God. And you can't take my good, and you can't take my love, and you can't take my anything. Because there's endless source. Because God is within me. I am God. I have the power of the universe within me, and there's nothing I can't do. Maureen mentioned, I think last week, that I used to tell kids, I still do, you have greatness in you. Because we all do. We all have greatness. We all have that divine potential, that perfection, that all we have to do is let it show. Here's some. And it leads me right into what I want to say. And I stole this from Reverend Mark Vieira, who was the minister at the church in North Hollywood that I attended for years. And again, it's a metaphor that works for me. He said, how in your closet, you got that chair, or in your room somewhere there's a room where you have a chair, and you throw your clothes on it. Instead of hanging it up or putting it away, you just put it there. And that's just becomes your clothes chair. And you try things on, that doesn't really feel right. You change your tie or your blazer, this doesn't feel right. And it gets to where it's just, at some point, it can be completely buried. The chair is gone. And it's not a chair anymore, it's just it's just a heap of clothes. And it might be a beautiful chair, it might be a work of art, but you can't even sit in it because it's just overflowing. It's completely enshrouded in these balled up bunch of clothes that you also can't take advantage of because they're all buried in there, and there might be the perfect shirt, but it's wrinkly now, and you don't know where it is because it's all in there. And that's, in some cases, us. We're the chair. And to get to that beautiful, perfect, functional, maybe work of art chair, we've got to just take off all of the junk that we've layered on there and dropped on there and forgotten about and butched up and shoved in there and covered ourselves up with. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to change. We don't have to get better. We just got to let the junk go. Let the negative thoughts go. Let the thoughts of separation from God, separation from each other, the ideas of sin and regret and shame, let them go. They don't serve us. They aren't the truth of who we are. They are not. And if we just get them out of the way, we're there. We're already there. And we just have to just be. And the chair doesn't shine, but if it did, the chair's light would shine without all the clothes all over it. And another thing that I'm stealing from Reverend Mark. I served on the board for years. I spent a lot of time and we talked a lot. And I didn't have anything to do with the spiritual direction of the church. It's purely just managing our prosperity and being dutiful stewards of our bounty. And I think we did that well. But we were talking one time. And it was a Saturday, maybe it was a party at my house or something. It was like, I gotta go. It's a school night. I've got to get a certain mark. What are you talking about? I said, really? You don't know? And he's like, well, it's all the same stuff. I mean, what's hard for me is figuring out a new way to say the same thing. And here it is. God is all there is, and love is a better way. Boom. Yeah. That's it. I just find different stories to tell and different nuances but if you got that, you're done. God is all there is, and love is a better way. We can hate ourselves, hate each other, hate God, be in competition with each other, have resentments, crucify people, or we can not. We can know that we all are one. That we are truly perfect and one with God. So, what does all this have to do with creativity? I could talk about the divine creative process. I could talk about 5-step prayer. I could sing for you this little stupid nursery rhyme I made up, which I will. Okay, why not? Here is a 5-step prayer, individualized, divine, creative process, and it goes like this. God is all there is, I'm one with God, my life is perfect in every way, I'm thankful I release on Him. Boom! That's it. Now, that's all the steps of the prayer, and I would literally be in my backyard gardening, singing this really stupid jingle that I made up. But it helped me remember the prayer, and I liked it. But remember this. All creation begins with a thought. And the New Thought Church, for me, was literally a new thought. I'd never thought these things before. I'd never known them before. And once I did, it changed my life. And the real lesson for me is that we can create the life we want. Just by changing our mind. Change your thought, change your experience. And by that, I would like to point out, I don't mean start wishing real hard for your life to be different. Start wishing real hard for something that you don't have. What I mean, and this might, be articulated differently to you, but when I say you can create the life you want, you can create your own experience of the life you already have. And you can celebrate it, and see all the beauty in it, or you can miss it. And I think you shouldn't miss it.
So what do you think? I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below, or you can go ahead and sign up for our newsletter at speakeasyspiritualcommunity.com so we can keep the conversation going. Because Speakeasy is all about engaging in engaging conversations. Everything is better when we all share our voice. I'm Maureen Muldoon, your spiritual vixen, reminding you to love more and fear less, and don't forget to laugh. What do you say?